Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Thanks for joining us. This webinar today is how one manufacturer improves safety and communication with mass notification. I'm Ann Cosgrove, the editor-in-chief of Facility Executive Magazine, and this webinar today is presented by Singlewire Software. Before we get started, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. Please note the control panel on your screen. This is where you can submit questions via the question box in that panel. You can send your questions in at any time for the speakers, and they will be addressed after the presentation. Also, please note the orange arrow on the left side of the control panel. Clicking on that will either expand or collapse the panel, so please be sure it is expanded so you can access the question box. Also, if at any time you experience a technical difficulty or have another type of question, please send a message to us in that question section, and someone on our team will answer you privately. Also, if you're interested in continuing education credits, you'll receive a certificate of attendance in an email from Facility Executive after this webinar, and you can report that to your association for continuing education credits. Now, I would like to introduce your speakers. The two gentlemen will be on video today, so I want to point out to everyone in the audience that you can see their webcams, by pulling down at the top of your screen, it should be, pulling down the gray bar above the slide so that you can see Pat and Chris. So with that, I'll go into our bios and we'll get right into the presentation. Pat Scheckel is Executive Vice President of Product Management and Marketing for Singlewire Software, and he joined the company in 2010. He's currently responsible for the product direction and marketing of the company's Informacast emergency mass notification system. He has 20 years of experience in the IT industry, including 2 decades with unified communications and collaboration. In 2001, he joined Berby Information Networks as co-founder of the Chicago office. And following CDW's acquisition of Berby in 2006, Pat served as VP of Converged Infrastructure. And today, Pat will be having a conversation with Christopher Moss. Chris is Senior IT Security Engineer for AW North Carolina, Inc. And there he's responsible for IT security and the networking infrastructure, ensuring devices there have appropriate connectivity while considering the connected devices' networking capabilities and security needs. These initiatives are changing the perception of IT's roles in the company because they assist various departments in gaining insight into machine processes while maintaining the security of sensitive data. So Pat and Chris will be talking about Chris's experience with mass notification, and we look forward to a good conversation. As always, please do send in your questions during and at the Q&A section at the end, and we will address as many of them as we can. All right, now we'll jump right into it. Hi, Pat, and hi, Chris.
Hello.
Hey, good afternoon.
All right, so I'm going to start off here. This is Pat Scheckel with Singlewire Software, your sponsor. I have just a couple of slides that I'm going to go through and describe who we are and what Informacast, our emergency mass notification platform is. And then we're going to spend the bulk of the time talking to Chris and really having him tell his story about what they've done with mass notification there at AW North Carolina. So first of all, Singlewire has created a platform called Informacast. It's an emergency mass notification platform. We've been around for nearly 20 years with this software. Our headquarters are in Madison, Wisconsin. We have about 115 people on staff, and because we've been at this for quite a while, we have about 7,000 customers in 50 countries. Some of our main use cases include things like notifying people about the most dire situations, including active shooters, severe weather, 911 alerts, that sort of thing. We have seen a shift in some of the use cases with COVID, and that's a lot more remote worker notifications. We have customers in all industries, but particularly in healthcare and manufacturing, notifying people about or asking people about health advisories or asking them to confirm that they're healthy. And this is very obvious, I think, in healthcare, but in manufacturing, many of the plants around the country, of course, have not shut down and people are coming to work. And so there are regular messages being sent out asking people to press 1 and respond if they're healthy, press 2 if they've exhibited any of the following symptoms. And a lot of this is being done in order to fast track people coming into the building because health screenings at the start of shifts were taking so long. So we see some really interesting things like that. We're not going to go too deep into that from the Singlewire perspective here today, unless of course that's something that Chris is doing at his workplace. And then in manufacturing, which of course AW North Carolina is a manufacturer, we see a lot of IoT type integrations. So this can be things like eye wash stations If someone hits an eye wash station, they're probably in distress and need help, and you want to get that health and safety engineer over there. We see things like we did a webinar a couple of weeks ago with Miller Electric, which makes welding equipment based in Appleton, Wisconsin, and they have a compressed air system that their tool system uses, and it will continue to work if it drops below 90 psi. But if it drops below that level, the product going out the door could be of subpar quality, and so they wanted to make sure that their plant floor workers were notified when this was happening. So they tied it into Informacast, and now if that PSI level goes below 90, they have a flashing alert out on the plant floor, and they know to stop working until they can get it back up and running. We have all sorts of use cases in this regard. I'm not going to go into too many more, but just know that Informacast is really about tying in both the physical and the virtual. It's about on-premises notification and mobile notification. And most of the mass notification market is really centered around mobile notifications. And within that area, it's really centered around SMS, because when you think about getting in touch with people on their mobile phones, a lot of times people don't want to install an app, even though that's a great way to go. They're just not comfortable installing another app. Email isn't time sensitive, and a lot of phone calls just aren't answered. So when we look at the best way to get in touch with people on a mobile phone, SMS text messaging is number one. And it is a necessary way of getting in touch with people, but by itself, it's not sufficient. And the reason that is because you have all sorts of people to which you owe a duty of care: visitors, contractors, guests, patients, parents, etc., depending on your industry. And you don't have their phone numbers. And so you're not going to reach them if there is an issue. And even if you do have their phone numbers, they may be in an area where cell coverage is poor, or they have the phone turned off in a bag or briefcase. If they're working on the plant floor, they might not even have it on them, or it may be something they wouldn't hear or even feel if it were on vibrate. There's been a lot of research in this area around reaching people on mobile phones, and they find that only about 80% of people are going to receive an alert if it's sent as a mobile alert, as a text message. And so layering on all these other methods, turning desk phones into emergency notification speakers, the same with desktops or laptops, as well as popping a window to the front of the screen on Windows or Mac. Tying into existing overhead paging systems, and where those aren't giving you good coverage, putting in IP speakers that give you visual notifications, scrolling a text message across, particularly helpful in a manufacturing or distribution environment where what you're looking at people wearing ear protection, hearing protection, and they might not hear that message. And so having the message be visual as well as audible can be really helpful, so to make sure you're reaching everybody every time it matters. So this is what we call our any to any diagram, the things that we can trigger from on the left-hand side, the things we send to on the right. And again, we believe we're sending more effective notifications that are going to get there faster, that are going to reach more people, and that are going to be noticed because we stream intrusive audio to so many devices. And of course, the fire life safety industry figured this out a long time ago, where if you have a fire in your building, you don't only receive a text message, but if you have something critical like a hazardous material spill or an active shooter or severe weather, you might only receive a text message if you receive any notification at all. And more, the industry is recognizing that that's not sufficient, and that we do owe a duty of care to people, both to our own employees as well as to those that might be on our premises that are not our employees. And so having a multi-channel notification system that sends to both on-premises and mobile devices is really important. And then after that message is sent, managing the ongoing situation with the safety team, using the collaboration tools that you use every day from Microsoft or Cisco becomes important as well. Well, I'm going to go ahead and move to the next slide here. We're going to go ahead and have our conversation now. So welcome, Chris.
Hey, thanks, Pat.
So Chris, tell us a little bit about your company, first of all, AW North Carolina. Where are you located? How many employees? How many sites? That sort of thing.
Yeah, so we're located in Durham, North Carolina. We don't make root beer. Other people might think so because of AW, but we actually are one of the biggest transmission makers in the world. I think we have anywhere between 2,000 to 2,400 employees at any given time. Right now, business is doing very well, even during the pandemic. So we have about 2,400 employees right now. That's pretty much what we do at AW North Carolina.
Okay. Well, first, it's great to hear that you're doing well during the pandemic. I mean, a lot of industries and a lot of businesses just can't say that. So consider yourself fortunate. I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
It's really, really good to hear. So you say transmissions, like, are we talking for cars, trucks, passenger vehicles, or commercial, or what sort of thing?
Just in our facility, we just make it for the manufacturing guys would know this much better than I do. I think the RAV4 and I think the Corolla. But Ice and Warner as a whole, I mean, makes it for all sorts of different vehicles, large Mack trucks down to little smart cars. So we pretty much run the gambit.
Okay, well, sounds like you're a Toyota shop right there in the location where you're located.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Good. And tell us a little bit about your role there.
I mean, my biggest role is IT security, but I also am one of the 5 system administrators here, and Informacast happens to fall under one of my responsibilities. So set up campaigns for HR, set up any kind of alerting, tie it into our Cisco call manager system, make sure everything's functioning well.
So when did that come about? Like when did someone tap you on the shoulder and say, "Hey, Chris, you're going to learn about Informacast"?
Well, my company put call manager and Informacast in 2016, about 3 months before I was hired, and I already had call manager experience. So when I walked in the door, they're like, "Oh, by the way, you're going to manage this." So.
Okay, so it sounds like it really came about because of the tie that Informacast has into your Cisco phone system. So it kind of rode along with the phone system, and that's how it ended up on your plate.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So just curious, like the last week or two, what's been top of mind for you? What's taken up your time there at work?
I mean, it's not really Informacast related, but always security, obviously, because that's just part of the job. But we've really been looking at bringing 5G to the manufacturing floor recently. So that's pretty much the top thing on my mind, and figuring out how to deploy it.
Wow, that sounds like a big job. I mean, it's kind of anytime you're changing layer 1 on the network stack, that's kind of a big job.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. I'm just curious, like, so what's the impetus for deploying 5G in the manufacturing floor? Is that to speed up processes, to install sensors and things that aren't there today? Like, what's the driving force?
Yeah, the driving force is mainly, I mean, we're starting to be like a smart company rather than just manufacturing without any intelligence. And 5G enables, honestly, that enables a lot of cost savings because of all the cameras we need to control quality. So like we might spend $1 million deploying the system, but each time we do a wired camera, it's going to cost $1,000 just to run a cable to it. So putting cellular out on the plant floor will, in the long run, save a lot of money.
I see. Yeah. So even for just stuff you might be deploying today, just fewer cable runs and plant management, that sort of thing. Gotcha. Okay. All right. That's interesting. So tell us a little bit about your mass notification journey. You said that you picked up Informacast as part of the phone system deployment a few years back. When exactly was that? Three or so years ago, you said?
I think we initially purchased it in 2016, early 2016.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at that point, it was more or less just like a weather system notification. So I think our old phone system just died on us, and we put in the call manager system, and our old phone system had a weather notification system in it, and we needed something that would work for that. So we bought Informacast with our call manager system.
Okay.
but it's absolutely evolved in the last 4 or 5 years that we've had it. Yeah, I mean, especially with COVID, we've been using it a lot for just sending out procedural things for to make sure that all employees know what to do if they are exhibiting symptoms. We've also used it for that press 1 for yes, press 2 for no type thing. Recently, during the flu season, we used it to send out a survey to all of our employees. Do you want a flu shot? Yes or no? And so we kind of had people sign up for flu shots that way, so it could give a more accurate count to the company that we buy the flu shots from. We haven't gone as far as to put it in any sensors out on our production floor, but we do have a monitoring system for our IT infrastructure that we do have tied into it, so it will send notifications to just the IT staff if something that's a piece of equipment goes down. Our IT will get a notification, and that's routed through the call manager system.
Okay, so it sounds like you have a mix of company-wide notifications or at least site-wide notifications, as well as more targeted notifications for the IT team. Tell me a little bit about those COVID procedural messages. I mean, is it someone has a positive case, do you let the plant know, or is it less broad than that?
So knock on wood, fortunately, we have not had a single positive case in the building. I mean, we have had people have COVID, obviously, but they call HR and they say, stay at home until you have a doctor's note. So I mean, mainly the Informacast messages are more procedural, like this is what you do if you are exhibiting symptoms. Please contact this person. That sort of stuff.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. It's interesting. We've seen in the Informacast Fusion database, we've seen customers send messages about positive tests and sites closing for a day or two, and then reopening and that sort of thing. So consider yourself fortunate with that large of a workforce, with 2,400 people in a location. Sounds like you're really fortunate that you haven't had. So you said you have some positive cases, but no one's come to work with it, and you haven't had like a big spreading event, it sounds like.
To the best of our knowledge, yes.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah, good. So so procedural messages, like telling people about just distancing and mask policies and things like that, is it, when you say COVID procedural messages that are being sent out, is it that sort of thing, or is it something else?
Yeah, like any time like a policy will change, as we're getting more data from the medical community, and we update our internal policies, we'll send out an Informacast. We used to have if you were traveling from out of the country, you had to quarantine for 14 days and that kind of stuff, just to make sure that everybody knew the correct procedure.
And that message, is that going out to everyone who works at that location, or is it a subset?
No, that one's going out to everyone. So yeah, we do have like a subset of athletes are called campaigns. Everyone, and then just email users, and then smaller subsets like just IT or different departments, depending on who needs to get the message.
So if one of those messages goes out, what channels is it being sent on? I mean, you said email, SMS. What else would it be reaching people on?
That's the main two we use, email and text message. We do have it tied into our call manager system, like I said, so we can pick up the phone and page the entire building with a message through Informacast. But yeah, the two main methods are just SMS and email. Okay.
And you said the initial use case was for severe weather notifications because you had a system previously that had that. So are you tying into, are you using like the common alerting protocol feed from National Weather Service to send out weather alerts, or is it something?
No, I mean, we typically just use it for weather during the winter time. You know, if the roads are real bad or whatnot, and a shift gets canceled. You know, I mean, we do have, you know, shift workers here, so we'll broadcast it. You know, say, you know, a shift is not running today. As well as not just for weather related. You know, we might not have gotten a shipment of parts we need to run a specific line. So, you know, rather than having everybody for that shift come in, you know, we'll try to give them, you know, 24 hours notice saying, hey, the shift might not run today. So, you know, just give them an early warning.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So more workforce notification in order to make sure they know where they're supposed to be and when.
Yeah.
So I got you. Okay. In terms of integration points within the building, do you have anything tied into it inbound, integrated sending automated alerts at all?
We do, but only to our IT staff right now. Now that you mention it, I mean, I can think of a bunch of use cases for stuff that we could be monitoring on the floor that would send to more appropriate people. But yeah, we do have a IT monitoring system that ties into our call manager system that then, you know, sends an email or text to IT staff.
Okay, so that would be something like if a switch or a router or something like that has trouble, you're getting a notification.
Yeah, I mean, as well as, I mean, we monitor processes that are run on different computers and servers that might affect the manufacturing process as well.
Okay, all right. So it's more than up down status then.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. And can you just describe some of the business benefits that you've seen there as a company from having a mass notification system in place?
Oh yeah, I mean, our HR department loves it. You know, they can, you know, get a message out to everybody in a few minutes. So I mean, this past flu season, I guess we're still in it, but our manager of HR really loved the fact that we can actually, you know, have the people that we send the messages to reply. And she's already thinking about like a list of other things that we can use it for, like, you know, just different surveys, you know, different answers to questions that she wants to ask. Just makes it much more simple. Don't actually have to, you know, write it down on a piece of paper. You can just text it and then they press 1 or 2 or whatever.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, yeah, it sounds really typical of what we hear from other customers. So you're responsible for setting up the system, but you know, there's someone in HR who's doing more of the sending, because at least for those particular cases, it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And are they just logging into the web console to send those out?
Either the web console or the app on their phone. Either one.
Okay. All right. So have you encountered any challenges in working with Informacast and rolling that out there?
I don't. I was trying to think of any issues we've had, and I really can't think of any. I think when it was initially being set up, it was set up to where anybody could use the overhead paging system. So I think, from what I heard, that was a little bit fun. But
They put a pin to protect that,
yeah.
So you had to log in before you could send a message.
Exactly. So once we got that figured out, I think it's been smooth sailing since then.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that is something we get asked about. That and like, you know, people have virtual panic buttons maybe at the front desk, and people are like, well, what if I hit that by accident? It's like, well, you could put a 4-digit code on it if you want to, so you don't have a false trigger. Just curious, what do you guys plan to do next? Are there other things that you plan on tying in to Informacast, or are you pretty much steady state at this point?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the HR manager has a list of things that she would like to try to do with it. From an IT point of view, I was actually thinking about, you know, as I'm sure everybody in the IT world knows, everybody needs to get on the Windows 10 and make sure that their computers are updated. I was actually thinking about making a survey for, or rather a sign up like we did for the flu vaccine, saying, hey, what day do you want to bring your computer up here to the IT? And so yeah, I was thinking about using it for scheduling, stuff like that.
Okay. Any idea what some of those HR use cases might be that she's thinking about doing?
I mean, she wanted, the first thing she was thinking about was you know, is HR doing a good job? Yes or no? So we haven't actually gotten to there yet. But you know, we do a lot of other things, like we have we're required to wear safety glasses, and some people need prescription glasses. So you know, she wants to build a campaign out to, you know, sign people up for doctor's appointments, eye doctor appointments. What else? See. Yeah, I mean, there's. I'd have to pull up the email again, but she definitely has a lot of ideas for it.
Yeah. Well, that's nice that you can customize it to send out anything you want. So
Yeah.
this content's up to you. So just curious, do you have any advice for anyone out there that's thinking about implementing a mass notification system? Just you know, how to approach that, maybe what to think about when deploying, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, number one, sign up for things like this. Find out who else using the product, make sure it's a product that you need and will use, and get all your use cases out of. And read up on the product, talk to people like me and yourself, Pat, talk to other companies that have deployed it, get their opinions, and just make sure that you're buying the product that suits your need.
Okay, all right, great. So just to remind the audience that we do have the ability to take your questions if you want to put those into the Q&A panel there in the GoToWebinar. We'll go ahead and answer any questions that you throw at us. So I'd love to have those, love to make this interactive.
Okay, great. Hi, it's Ann back on. Thank you, gentlemen, for that. Yeah, we do have some questions, and I will kind of pose those to both of you. And of course, whoever wants to take it, we can continue the conversation. And everyone in the audience, please continue to send your questions. Okay, so Chris, thanks for sharing that, you know, the story of how you are using it at your company, and Pat, thanks for facilitating that. I will first ask sort of a general question that does kind of piggyback on what you two had just talked about. And that was that, Chris, you had mentioned that at this time, if I was clear on that, that you're now using, at this point, you are sending out messages and using Informacast, those messages via SMS, text message, and email. So the question there was, what other communication channels can be used by, you know, with Informacast? So maybe Pat, you can take that, and then Chris, if you want to weigh in on any future thoughts, that would be great as well. But Pat.
Yeah, sure. So when you're talking about sending to notification channels other than SMS and email, we can call phones, but really what we started was sending a broadcast to your desk phones, to IP phones. And that's particularly effective because instead of calling them, which is hard to do at scale in a timely fashion, for one thing, most companies don't have the phone trunking capacity out to the public telephone network to handle that sort of volume, and so the calls will be blocked and delayed and so forth. So what we do is we put that audio payload, we put that message onto the internal data network of your organization, and then the phones play that message. So we're broadcasting using what's called multicast, a network protocol. And the reason that matters is because instead of having to call those phones, we're broadcasting to them. So we can send to thousands of phones in just a few seconds, as opposed to calling them, which would take minutes. Unlike with a phone call where you would have to pick that call up and answer it, we are taking over the phone and we're broadcasting audio to the phone. And that's just more effective because again, you don't have to answer it, you're just gonna hear it. We're turning all of those phones into emergency notification speakers. We can do the same thing with computer desktops. And of course, we can do the same thing with existing overhead paging systems. We can give them new intelligence, as well as sending to IP speakers. And so those are the 4 main ways we're gonna get audio out to devices that are on your network. We can also send a digital signage, which typically doesn't have audio. It's typically gonna be a little player connected to a TV type monitor, and we're just gonna repaint the screen with that content. So those are some of the ways. We also talked a little bit about tying into different devices, and in most of the IoT examples, those are inbound to Informacast, but we can also go outbound. So if you think about maybe a lockdown message, you can physically lock doors that weren't already locked, for example. But just to take a step back, it's the combination of sending to mobile devices and all those on-premises communication channels, your phones, your laptops and desktops, and your overhead paging system, and sending audio out there and getting it there very quickly.
Okay, thank you. And you mentioned digital signage, so I do want to hit on the visual aspect. A question did come in about digital signage and you know, some of the capabilities there. So what type of capabilities are with the visual signage? I mean, is that a signage that facilities may already have in place? Do you go ahead and place that? And on another note, what ways are there to communicate, for instance, perhaps other languages, or you know, can you do it in other languages, audio or video, I guess, or you know, other kind of capabilities there?
Sure. Yeah, so typically what we're doing with digital signage, we're tying into what the customer already has. We can certainly point them to our ecosystem. There are about a dozen different digital signage manufacturers that have an integration with Informicast. That integration is typically using CAP, the Common Alerting Protocol. We can either take inbound CAP like we do from the National Weather Service, or we can be a CAP source and we can send outbound to a digital signage system. If it's not using CAP, it might be using RSS. And so typically we're tying into something they already have. If they don't already have something, we'll just point them to that ecosystem page and say, you might want to look at one of these. And then from there, they can click through and they can see a knowledge base article that describes the integration between Informicast and one of those digital signage providers. I can see that, you know, one of the questions is about do we support more than one language? And the answer is yes. It's the language can be whatever the customer wants it to be. We do support double byte characters for those languages that require that. And so a lot of customers are putting in their messages in their message templates. They're putting in 2 or 3 languages to make sure that they're reaching everybody in their language.
Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
We're a Japanese-based company, so yeah, we also send out Japanese as well.
Okay, great. And now I do want to talk about Chris, you had mentioned in the conversation using Informicast for COVID-19 procedures, et cetera. So that led to the question of, you know, how easy has it been, or I guess not how easy, but what has the process been, generally speaking, to adapt or add those capabilities? You know, the pandemic came on. You know, your company obviously made some decisions to use Informicast for notifications and other procedures related to COVID. So can you talk a little bit about, or Pat also, please mention how other customers perhaps have done this, you know, kind of what's the process there to add these uses for the system? What does that entail?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. I mean, I think I spent a half an hour building it out for the COVID notifications. I mean, you basically just log into the admin web portal and create a template for whatever your use case is. Then, you know, give HR or whoever the person may be permission to use that template, and that's pretty much it. It's pretty intuitive.
Yeah, I'll just say that when COVID hit, we wanted to make sure that we gave people options for sending. So what we saw people sending messages that were COVID related when we were doing our database pull. And so we looked at those and we saw some commonalities, like, for example, asking for people to attest to their health. We see healthcare systems doing that, and as well as manufacturers and schools. And so we pulled some of that content, and then we saw other messages being sent along the lines of, hey, we've had a positive test, or we did a deep clean and we're reopening tomorrow at this location, that sort of thing. So we pulled together a handful of those, and we genericized them, and to make them templates, and we created what we call a COVID-19 message pack, which is just a series of message templates that any of our customers can use. It's not like there's any additional charge for that. It's just something they can download and then import those message templates into their system, just to save them a little bit of time if they wanted to see what maybe some of the best practices are from their peers being used out there. So, really just trying to help people understand, here's what some of your peer group might be using, and you might want to consider using too.
Okay, great, thank you. So the other question I did want to, we just talked about uses, specific use with the COVID, and I wanted to ask, from both of your perspectives, what are some creative use cases for mass notification in a manufacturing facility? Chris, you and Pat talked about some of the use cases or the ways that you are using Informacast. So I just wanted to kind of circle back to that to maybe talk about some of the, some of those that you are using, Chris, that you maybe hadn't expected in the beginning in adopting it. And then so I'll pose it to Chris, but then also Pat, in your wider view with customers, what have you seen?
From the IT side, I think that every minute that the manufacturing plant is down is costing us money. So just the ability to tie it into our IT monitoring system so we can react quicker to getting the production back running, it has really helped tremendously, and also save the company a lot of money because of less downtime.
Yeah, in terms of some of the creative use cases, I have a couple of slides here just to talk to some of the creative manufacturing use cases, just some of our other customer stories real quick. This is, as it says, an ice cream manufacturer, and to kill the listeria, which can still live at low temperatures, they use ammonia, and this plant is 7 football fields long. So what they have, the ammonia sensors like all plants do, but the ammonia sensor really only sends an alert within a very specific area. And so what they would, and because it's so big, what would happen is that sensor would just notify everybody in the immediate area, but then someone on a forklift would be taking a pallet of ice cream from one side of the plant to the other, and they drive right through the ammonia cloud, and now they've got breathing trouble and a workers' comp claim and so forth. So that they tied those sensors into Informacast, and now when one of those ammonia sensors goes off, they have a plant-wide notification, so everybody knows exactly where it's happening. And if they're in the affected area, of course they still leave, but if they're nowhere near it, they don't need to worry about it, and they know not to go to that area. And then this instance is this is actually Joy Global, which is now a division of Komatsu, based in Milwaukee, outside of real close to Miller Park, where the Brewers play. They have a video case study on our website where they're telling this story in their own words. But they had a plant worker who was going into cardiac arrest, was able to get to a phone hanging on the plant floor, dialed 911. But it's a huge work floor and facility, and the guard shack saw that this had happened, and they were able to get out there. They knew where this had happened because of the software. They grabbed the defibrillator off the wall, and they shocked this person back to life before EMS even arrived at the outskirts of the property. So seconds really matter in certain situations, and I think this is a pretty good example of what happened there.
Okay, great, thank you. So we do have a question about, I guess it would be an administrative aspect of ensuring that the system like Informacast is effective in notifying people. So specifically, and I'm probably sure this isn't a question that's only for this asker, but it says we have a few messages, when we send messages to people, but the biggest trouble is getting folks to keep their contact information current, sending out requests annually to update. People just don't maybe just don't return, a good percentage of them don't return their contact info. So, not being sure that you have the right contact info. Can either of you kind of talk about what the strategies might be for that to make sure that the system actually has the right info?
You want Chris?
We just pretty much let our HR department take care of that side, so I wouldn't know too much about that side.
Okay. We've seen customers do a variety of things. I mean, there's kind of two main ways to handle user management, just from a technical perspective, and then there's like the process and policy, which is really where this question gets to. From a technical perspective, you have what's called a user loader, where you have essentially an automated process where you're tying into whatever your source of truth is, Active Directory, your HR system, whatever the case may be. That helps to increase the percentage of correct phone numbers, because if people are getting other messages sent to them, and they're keeping that number on file, then that helps. That's one. The other thing is to make it very easy for them to update. So, using like a short URL or a QR code, and then placing a placard around different entrances saying, hey, are you up to date? But then there's the whole behavioral piece, which is really at the core of this question. Like, how do you compel people to do this? Like, so you make it easy enough for them, but how do you compel them to give you their number if A, they haven't ever given it to you, or B, their number is and that's not an easy question to answer, but I can tell you we've seen people do creative things like offer a gift card. Like they hold a lottery, and the only way that you're going to win is if we have your phone number, because we're going to text you. So there's some creative things like that. I'm not going to tell you if there's a silver bullet that is going to take your compliance rate from 80 up to 99%, but there are some creative things you can do that don't cost a whole lot.
Okay, thank you. And then I think we'll wrap it up. And this is with a last question that's really gets to the heart of interest to those who are attending today, of course. And it's what makes a mass notification effective. So, Pat, I'm sure that you have some insight on that. And then Chris, if you wanted to join in on any from your experience. But at the heart of it, what are some of the points that make a mass notification effective, both from the technical standpoint or maybe implementation and carrying out and maintenance as well? Either of you could take that.
Yeah, the thing that for us, what we found that makes a mass notification effective is the speed, the reach, and the intrusiveness. Because ultimately, if we take a step back for just a moment, why are we sending a notification at all? We want people to take some sort of behavior. That could be just to stay where they are. That could be to go somewhere. It could be to respond with certain information. But ultimately, the reason you send a notification is you want behavior to change in some way. Well, speed matters for obvious reasons. A lot of these times we're talking about emergencies. And so like with the example I gave of the cardiac arrest and dialing 911, speed matters because you need to get people to take a response very quickly. Reach is all about that. How do I get close to 100% of my desired population? We achieve that by sending to all sorts of different modalities, different communication channels. Talked about the phones, desktops, mobile phones, etc. And then intrusiveness is probably a little bit less obvious, but that fire alarm system example really proves that point. People respond to intrusive audio. If you just get a text message, you may or may not see or hear it, and even if you do get it and read it, you might be is that, how important is that, right? That's how real is that? But if you get that text message and you get a desktop pop-up and you get audio coming across, you're much more likely to see that as being legitimate and to take the appropriate action that's being requested. So from our perspective and our experience, more effective notifications come from speed, reach, and intrusiveness.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I mean, I didn't mention this earlier, but we do use it during our tornado and fire drills, and that absolutely triggers everyone when it's blaring from all the desk phones and such. Another thing, especially with the text messages, our HR department tries to keep everything really short and concise, so they're not trying to create a paragraph on their phone.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you, gentlemen. And Pat, I see here we have an offer for a free trial. Can you just talk a little bit about that? What folks in the audience, if they're interested, might do to reach out?
Yeah, you bet. So if you go to singlewire.com/mobile, there's a form there that you can fill out, and it's a rapid deployment. So you fill out a little bit of information, and there's really kind of 6 steps to getting set up, and it automates the first 4 of those for you. So you can be sending your first message in the matter of a couple of hours from start to finish, with most of that not being actual work time that you'd have to put into it. So really just want to give people the ability to get up and running. And it's, I believe it's a 14-day trial for 100 users.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, I want to thank you again, Pat and Chris. Thanks for presenting today and for talking about this important topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you to Singlewire Software for presenting the webinar. Of course, thanks to our audience for listening in and for your participation. Please do take that information down on the screen, but I will also mention that a recording of the webinar will be available online at facilityexecutive.com, and you can also visit singlewire.com for more information. So thank you again, everyone. Have a great afternoon. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.